Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Today the portion is called Vayera, and I titled it "Show Me the Way to Go Home." Parashat Vayera exemplifies cycles and patterns in the Torah that once we understand, they can help prevent us from repeating the mistakes of our predecessors. Our beloved Rabbi always likened the events in our lives to a spiral that can be viewed either from an upward or a downward perspective. He would say that when we walk with God, the events of our lives follow an upward trend. It may seem that we're repeating the same things over and over, but it's important to notice that we always take 2 steps forward, but only 1 step back, so that we're always improving and handling situations with even just a little more wisdom than before. But however, the opposite is also true. When we don't trust in our creator, and we choose to do things our own way, the spiral can lead us downward. This is true not only on a personal level, but also for the whole of mankind. It seems to be a law in the universe where the microcosm depicts the macrocosm. Well, this was true for Abraham and Sarah. Their trust in God would be repeatedly tested, as is yours and as is mine, and it would help them to fulfill their callings as first father and mother of Israel. If no one had been willing to follow Abraham, he would have questioned whether or not he really did hear God's voice. But the hearts of the other souls who were also stirred to leave with him must have encouraged him. They would have encouraged him. And then along the way, he met others, like Melchizedek. Out of nowhere, this Cohen of El Elyon appears, inspiring Abraham even to share a tithe of his wealth before continuing his journey. Why would Abraham give such a huge offering to a perfect stranger? I think it's because he recognized that this Cohen, you would think that that's a Hebrew word, but it isn't. Cohen is a priest. That this Cohen knew the God who spoke to him, and Abraham was so happy and willing to share with him from what God had blessed him. Whenever I meet someone who has the same love for the Creator as I do, it fills my heart and soul with such joy that it opens a wellspring of generosity. Over the years, I've seen that those of us who love and want to serve God within this small community have given a generosity of spirit and have been given a generosity of spirit and the desire to support it from what God has provided them. These are the ones who are truly blessed. They serve not only with their time, but also with the resources that God has poured into their lives. Our rabbi's story reminds me so much of Abraham's. And he told us about his clear call to serve God, which eventually led him here to Montreal to start this congregation. But that's a long story, and it's meant for another day. Abraham was tested when God told him to listen to Sarah and to send Hagar and Ishmael away. He loved his firstborn son, even if he wasn't from Sarah. But Abraham obeyed God, and it was God who told him to send them away and not to worry, because he would also make a nation from Ishmael. The Torah doesn't say that all nations would be blessed through Ishmael, it would be through Isaac, but that the world would be blessed through Abraham and his descendants. We know that Isaac is the son of the promise. He would be the forefather of the people chosen by God for a special purpose, to be Or L'Goyim. We were also told that Ishmael and his descendants would be like wild donkeys, always fighting amongst themselves, and if not, with others. This is not a new pattern for humanity. That's the wild donkey side of our human nature. I'm sure we've all felt it. It began with Cain killing his brother Abel. And the cycle of brother killing brother will continue until we learn to dominate the wild donkey within us. Adam was given dominion over all God's creation, and that includes us. We have to dominate that part of our egos, and that can only happen when we surrender to and when we trust in the God of Abraham, as he himself was being taught to do. The world still has a long way to go in that area, but from our prophecies, we know that it will happen one day. For now, we have to begin with ourselves. We know about the troubles ahead for future generations because Sarah ran ahead of God. She thought she could fix things and did it her way. And here, that same pattern continues with the two daughters of Lot. They got their father drunk, reminiscent of Noah after the flood, and both slept with their father, taking Ham's incident with his father just a little step further. The consequences? More enemies for Israel, the Moabites and the Ammonites. The girls must have believed that the whole world was destroyed. Certainly their entire world was. And sleeping with their father was the only way in their mind to continue his lineage. You know, this was interesting because these girls were raised in Sodom, where there were no moral standards. Lot must have taught them about the God of Abraham because they understood the importance of descendants. And also, it says that they were virgins. We may think that living in North America today makes us better than those living in Sodom, but sadly, the idea of being a virgin before marriage today is rare in our modern Western society. The secular world is no longer interested in having children to keep the lineage going. They're more interested in having careers, having their freedom, and if they want to raise anything, they buy a dog. That's a spiral downward in my estimation. And hopefully it's not too late to turn that false idea around, and hopefully in my lifetime. The scriptures, however, give us hope with the story of Ruth. She was a Moabite. She turned to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and became a great mother of Israel, the great-great-grandmother of King David. You know, the Torah is brutally honest about our failures, and it always shows us the way to return and provides us with the route to redemption, both on a personal level and on a national one. I question, however, why Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away with nothing but bread and water. He was a wealthy man. We know that his inheritance would be for Isaac. Perhaps it was because Abraham knew that Ishmael's offspring would also become a wealthy nation. Look at Saudi Arabia and the Emirates today. They have the oil that we don't. But our wealth, the wealth of Israel, lies in God's blessings to us, promised through Abraham, so that we in turn could bless all the nations of the world. That is exactly what we're doing, although very few wish to acknowledge. That stems from these ancient jealousies, beginning here, that have been carried down throughout the ages. There has been enmity toward Israel throughout the ages by the descendants of Ishmael, not all, by Lot, through Moab and Ammon, again, not all, because we see there are Ruths, and later, even through the sons of Abraham with Keturah. We read that in Psalm 83:6. And we are waiting for that root of hostility to be healed. There are family feuds that go on for centuries, long after the descendants even know why they're still fighting. We see this in our own families, but we must try our best to rebuild broken relationships, and it begins with those of us who know God. No other nation, I'm talking about the land of Israel, the nation of Israel, no other nations do as much for others as Israel does. And that stems from the heart of God. But sadly, when Israel gives in to that opposite aspect of our nature, that wild donkey, we suffer the consequences, and so does the world. The ultimate test for Abraham was when God asked him to take his unique son Isaac, and sacrifice him on an altar of wood. This request sets up another pattern that Israel would have to follow throughout their generations, that human beings were not meant to be sacrificed. Throughout the scripture, we see God weaning his chosen people away from their cruel rituals meant to appease their gods. Abraham knew God would do something to save Isaac because he told his servants to wait for him, stating, "We will return." When I read those words, they almost sounded prophetic to me, reminding me of our name, Kehilat Shear Yashuv, a remnant shall return. No matter what trials we go through, we always return to our God. The angel of God stopped the hand of Abraham at the last minute, and God then provided a ram, not a lamb. This story has been used to compare the sacrifice of Isaac with the sacrifice of Jesus, but the concept of human sacrifice in both biblical and rabbinic Judaism is abhorrent, and it is a pagan practice. This pattern set down here, the pagan practice of sacrificing children, would be stayed by the hand of God. He would provide the perfect offering when he was satisfied that trust was established. He waited until the very last minute before showing up and saving Isaac from the hand of Abraham. How often do you and I pray for something to relieve us from the trials we are experiencing? And then at the very last moment, something appears that can only come from the mind of God. Another pattern established in this story begins with Sarah. Although hers is remembered as the first story of a miraculous birth, within this parasha lies a tale of how God had closed the wombs of all the women in King Abimelech's household when Sarah was held there. Abraham's God spoke to Abimelech in a dream. It shows us that God can speak to anyone he chooses. Hearing from God is not only confined to those who belong to a religious sect. This gives us hope that God can certainly speak to any one of us. That's the beautiful thing of having a relationship, a personal relationship with the God of creation. Sarah's miraculous birth would be the first of many in the scriptures and beyond, including Yeshua. We read about it in the Haftorah portion with the Shunammite. Again, it depicts that God is present in every aspect of our lives, from birth to death. The most difficult thing for us to do is to be still and listen to the quiet voice of God directing us. It usually takes us getting sick or some seeming disaster that happens to get us to pay attention. Why did God spend so much time negotiating? Why did Abraham spend so much time negotiating with God about saving Sodom when he never said a word about saving Isaac? He kept going. He didn't give up. If there are 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, and finally 10 righteous men in Sodom, will you save it? God quietly repeated after each one, I will save it. I was wondering, was it because of the flood that was still fresh in Abraham's mind? After all, Noah died when Abraham was 58. So he well knew the story of the flood and how the whole earth died. That was well in his mind. And for people like me who were born during or just at the end of World War II, the Holocaust is still fresh in our minds. This is also evidence of God's endless mercy and patience with us. This shows us that God never gives up on us. So let us not give up on ourselves. You know, in this parasha, we read about the well of water named Beersheba, the well of oath, where Abimelech and Abraham made a pact after their quarrel. We'll read many stories about people gathering at wells. These were social hotspots where people met to gather water for drinking, watering their cattle and their agriculture. They were far more than mere sources of water. They hold deep spiritual significance. God's provision, spiritual nourishment, and communal harmony. This community, Shear Yashuv, provides a wellspring of living water to anyone who wants to learn how to apply God's written Torah to their lives so that they can build a personal relationship with the God of Israel. This is the key to building healthy relationships with ourselves and others. These patterns, these cycles and spirals also represent a picture where we are in God's timetable for humanity. As we choose to drink from God's well of provision and spiritual sustenance, we, like Abraham, thrive within that upward spiral. But if and when we choose to ignore him, we fall into a downward one. Right now, as we look at the uprisings in Europe, around the world, and even in Israel, we see the wild donkey kicking once again. The only way to turn that around is to humble ourselves, to return to the God of Abraham, to be obedient to his commandments, to thank him for everything, and beg him to go to battle for us. He will always have our backs. Shabbat Shalom.